There was a time in my life when I genuinely believed that people were exactly who they claimed to be. If someone smiled at me, I assumed they meant well. If someone called me brother, friend, partner, or even family, I believed the loyalty behind those words was real. I thought manipulation looked obvious. I thought hypocrites were easy to detect. I thought evil announced itself loudly. But the older I became, the more I realized something deeply uncomfortable about human nature. The most dangerous people rarely look dangerous at all. The first lesson that truly changed me came from a man I trusted for nearly 7 years. To everyone around us, he looked like one of the most loyal people in my life. He celebrated my wins publicly. He laughed with me, defended me in rooms I was not in. He even called me brother, so often that other people believed we would probably grow old together. But slowly, almost invisibly, strange things began happening around me. Opportunities one should have gotten disappeared mysteriously. People I had good relationships with suddenly became distant. Rumors about me started circulating, but nobody could ever tell me exactly where they started from. At first, I blamed coincidence. Then I blamed bad luck. Then one night, everything changed. I remember sitting in a parked car outside a restaurant after hearing something that made my stomach turn cold. Someone casually revealed that this same man had spent years quietly poisoning opportunities behind my back while smiling in my face every single day. He was not attacking me openly because open enemies are easy to fight. Instead, he operated through whispers, emotional manipulation, and strategic friendliness. In public, he protected my image. In private, he slowly weakened it. And the terrifying part was this: I had sensed something was wrong long before I had proof. My body knew before my mind accepted it. That moment forced me into a painful realization. Human beings often detect deception subconsciously long before logic catches up. Sometimes your intuition notices tiny inconsistencies your conscious mind ignores. A delayed smile, forced laughter, hidden irritation in someone's eyes when you succeed, strange tension in their voice, the uncomfortable feeling that someone is performing kindness instead of naturally expressing it. Most people dismiss these signals because modern society trains us to doubt ourselves. We are taught to ignore instinct and prioritize appearances. But ancient civilizations did the opposite. They trained perception like a survival weapon. Long before psychology books existed, ancient cultures spoke about a hidden eye within humanity. The Egyptians symbolized it through the Eye of Horus. Hindu teachings described the Ajna chakra. Buddhist monks spoke about awakening awareness beyond illusion. Even certain African spiritual systems believed that energy revealed truth faster than words ever could. Different civilizations described it differently, but the message was strangely similar. Human beings possess a deeper perception that can detect hidden intentions beneath surface behavior. Now let me be clear. When I speak about the third eye, I am not simply talking about magic or fantasy. Some people imagine glowing spiritual visions and supernatural powers, but what I discovered was far more practical and dangerous. The third eye, at least in the way I came to understand it, is heightened awareness. It is the ability to observe human behavior deeply enough to notice what emotionally blind people miss. It is learning how to read tension, insecurity, envy, manipulation, fear, hidden resentment, and fake loyalty before those things fully reveal themselves. And once I began studying this seriously, I realized something disturbing. Manipulators survive because most people are spiritually asleep socially. One of the greatest tricks manipulative people ever pulled was convincing society that emotional perception is irrational. Think about it carefully. How many times have people ignored red flags because someone looked nice? How many people married manipulators because the manipulator knew how to perform affection? How many friendships survived for years while jealousy quietly grew underneath? Human beings are masters of disguise. Some smiles are negotiations. Some compliments are surveillance. Some friendships are competitions hiding behind politeness. I once met a businessman during a late-night gathering who told me a story I have never forgotten. He had built a successful company from almost nothing. For years, he trusted a close associate who appeared humble, supportive, and deeply loyal. This associate constantly praised him publicly and even defended him against criticism. But behind the scenes, he quietly collected information about the business, studied weaknesses, manipulated employees emotionally, and slowly positioned himself to take control. By the time the businessman realized what was happening, the betrayal had already spread through the company like poison through water. What shocked him most was not the betrayal itself. It was realizing that the signs had always existed. The associate's fake humility. His subtle resentment whenever success was discussed. The carefully hidden competitiveness beneath every compliment. The energy was wrong from the beginning, but nobody trusted their perception enough to acknowledge it. That is the hidden war most people never realize they are living inside. The war between perception and deception. Some people enter your life to support you. Others enter to study you. Some people clap for your success while secretly hoping for your downfall. Some people only feel safe when you remain weak, insecure, or emotionally dependent on them. And because modern society focuses so heavily on appearances, many people never learn how to distinguish genuine energy from performative behavior. Religion has warned about this for centuries. In Christianity, there are warnings about wolves in sheep's clothing. In Islam, hypocrisy is considered one of the most spiritually dangerous human traits. Buddhist teachings repeatedly warn about illusion, ego, and false appearances. Across countless traditions, there is a repeated warning that not everyone who speaks kindly carries honest intentions. Ancient people understood something modern society tries to ignore. Human beings are deeply psychological creatures driven by fear, insecurity, desire, envy, ego, and hidden emotional needs. The more I studied this, the more I realized that the third eye is not merely about seeing other people. It is also about seeing yourself clearly. Because the uncomfortable truth is this: manipulation thrives not only because manipulators exist, but because emotionally blind people are easy to control. Desperation blinds people. Loneliness blinds people. Ego blinds people. The need for validation blinds people. Some individuals can sense emotional weakness almost instantly, and they know exactly how to exploit it. I learned this lesson painfully in relationships as well. There was a period in my life when I confused emotional intensity with genuine connection. I thought attention meant loyalty. I thought chemistry meant trust. But manipulators often create emotional addiction deliberately. They study your insecurities quietly. They learn your fears. They mirror your desires. They become whatever version of themselves gives them access to your mind. And once they gain emotional influence, many begin controlling reality itself through guilt, confusion, mixed signals, emotional withdrawal, and psychological games. What frightened me most was discovering that the calmest people are often the most observant. Ancient warriors understood this deeply. Samurai traditions emphasized emotional control because emotional reactions expose weakness. Stoics practiced silence because silence reveals what emotional noise hides. Monks isolated themselves not only for spirituality, but to sharpen awareness without distraction. The more emotionally reactive a person becomes, the less they truly observe. And this is where most people fail. They listen to words but ignore patterns. They focus on appearances but ignore energy. They chase validation while revealing their weaknesses openly. Manipulators understand this better than ordinary people do. That is why some people can walk into a room and immediately identify the insecure person, the desperate person, the jealous person, and the emotionally wounded person within minutes. But over time, I began training myself differently. I started observing reactions instead of promises. I watched how people behaved when others succeeded. I studied facial tension, tone changes, forced enthusiasm, passive aggression disguised as jokes, emotional inconsistencies. And the more I practiced this awareness, the more impossible it became to ignore what human beings truly communicate beneath language. This audiobook is not about becoming paranoid. It is not about seeing enemies everywhere. It is about awakening perception in a world where deception has become normal. It is about learning the ancient art of emotional awareness, psychological observation, spiritual discernment, and social survival. Because once you truly awaken the third eye, you begin understanding a truth most people never fully realize. People always reveal themselves eventually. The question is whether you will learn to see it before the damage is done. For most of my life, I thought the idea of the third eye belonged only to mystics, conspiracy theorists, and people searching for hidden spiritual powers in deserts and mountains. I imagined incense-filled temples, mysterious symbols painted on ancient walls, and stories too unrealistic to matter in ordinary life. But the more I studied human behavior, ancient civilizations, religion, and psychology, the more I realized something strange. Nearly every major civilization in human history believed that human beings possessed a deeper form of perception that went beyond ordinary sight. And what fascinated me most was this. These civilizations were separated by oceans, languages, and thousands of years of history, yet many of them arrived at surprisingly similar conclusions. They believed people could sense danger before it appeared. They believed energy carried emotional truth. They believed deception could be felt before it was spoken aloud. And above all, they believed that spiritually awake people could read human nature in ways ordinary people could not. If you have ever had a strange feeling about someone before discovering who they truly were later, then you already understand more about the third eye than you probably realize. And that is exactly why this book was written for you. The first time I seriously encountered the concept of the third eye was through Hindu teachings about the Ajna chakra. In ancient Hindu traditions, the Ajna chakra is believed to exist between the eyebrows and is associated with intuition, wisdom, perception, and inner awareness. It is often called the command center of consciousness. Yogis believe that when this eye awakened, a person could see beyond illusion and recognize truth hidden beneath appearances. At first, I dismissed this as symbolism. But then I met an older man during a late-night conversation who changed the way I thought about intuition forever. He had spent decades studying meditation and human behavior. During our conversation, he said something that unsettled me deeply. He told me that the reason manipulative people succeed is because most human beings live disconnected from their own perception. According to him, intuition is like a muscle. Ignore it long enough, and it weakens. Train it consistently, and it sharpens beyond what most people believe possible. He then shared a story from his youth. He once worked with a business partner who appeared charming, spiritual, and generous. Everyone trusted him instantly. But the older man told me that from the beginning, something felt off. He could not explain it logically. The man smiled correctly, spoke politely, helped people publicly. Yet every conversation left behind strange emotional tension. Months later, the partner disappeared with company money after secretly manipulating financial records for years. The old man looked at me calmly and said, "My mind trusted him. My intuition never did." That sentence stayed with me for years. Because if we are honest, many of us have lived through moments exactly like that. We ignored a strange feeling. We silenced our instincts. We convinced ourselves we were overthinking. Then reality eventually revealed what our intuition already knew. If that sounds painfully familiar, then stay with me all the way through this audiobook, because what we are discussing here may completely change how you understand human behavior forever. And if you can already relate to these experiences, subscribe, like, comment, and share this audiobook with someone whose eyes also need to open. The ancient Egyptians approached this mystery differently through the Eye of Horus. The symbol itself appears almost supernatural, but what fascinated researchers for decades was the strange similarity between the Eye of Horus and parts of the human brain, especially regions near the pineal gland. The Egyptians associated the eye with protection, wisdom, awareness, and hidden knowledge. Pharaohs and priests surrounded themselves with symbols designed to project divine perception and spiritual authority. Some historians believe these symbols were not only spiritual but psychological. Ancient rulers understood that human beings respond powerfully to mystery and symbolism. A ruler who appeared connected to divine insight became harder to question. Spiritual imagery created emotional influence over entire populations. And honestly, when I look at the modern world, I realize this technique never disappeared. Politicians, celebrities, corporations, influencers, and religious leaders still use symbols, emotional storytelling, and carefully crafted images to influence how people feel. I remember reading about a controversial spiritual leader years ago who built an enormous following simply by convincing people he possessed higher perception. His followers believed he could read energy and detect hidden intentions. Some claimed he could predict betrayal before it happened. But later investigations revealed that many of his spiritual insights actually came from careful observation of body language, emotional vulnerability, and psychological profiling. He had mastered perception so effectively that people mistook observation for supernatural power. And that realization changed the way I understood the third eye completely. Sometimes what ancient people called spiritual sight may have been advanced emotional awareness combined with intense observation. Think about that carefully for a moment. Imagine how powerful a person becomes when they learn to study emotions quietly while everybody else only listens to words. That is why manipulative people can sometimes feel almost psychic. They are not reading minds. They are reading patterns. Buddhist teachings took another path entirely. Rather than focusing on mystical dominance, Buddhist traditions emphasized awareness without emotional attachment. Monks trained themselves to observe thoughts, emotions, reactions, and desires without immediately responding to them. According to many Buddhist teachings, suffering increases when people become controlled by ego, fear, anger, envy, and illusion. The more I reflected on this, the more I realized how manipulation depends on emotional blindness. Manipulators exploit reactions. They trigger insecurity. They provoke anger. They create confusion. But a person who observes calmly becomes much harder to control. That is one reason emotionally disciplined people often intimidate manipulators. Calm awareness destroys many psychological games before they fully begin. I once knew a man who practiced meditation daily for years. He was not physically intimidating, wealthy, or loud, yet people respected him everywhere he went. During tense situations, he remained calm in ways that almost felt unnatural. One evening I asked him how he stayed so composed when others became emotional. He smiled and said something I will never forget. "Most people are not reacting to reality," he said. "They are reacting to their own emotional wounds." That sentence opened my eyes to how deeply unconscious many human interactions truly are. Jealousy, insecurity, resentment, pride, fear, loneliness, validation. These invisible emotional forces shape conversations more than logic does. Buddhist awareness teachings focused heavily on recognizing these emotional illusions before they control behavior. And perhaps this is why some people always seem trapped in manipulative relationships while others avoid them early. Some people see emotional patterns before emotional chaos fully forms. If you are already beginning to recognize similar situations from your own life, understand something important. You are not weak for missing these patterns before. Most people were never taught how to observe human behavior deeply. Society trains people to impress others, not understand them. That is why this audiobook exists. To sharpen your perception in a world filled with emotional performance and hidden agendas. Ancient African spiritual traditions also carried fascinating beliefs about perception and energy. Across different African cultures, spiritual elders often believed that human beings carried emotional energy that could be sensed intuitively. Some communities believed envy itself carried destructive force. Others believed certain individuals possessed heightened awareness capable of sensing hidden danger before it arrived. Growing up, I heard older relatives speak carefully about people who carried heavy energy. As a child, I thought these were merely superstitions. But later in life, I began noticing how certain individuals changed the emotional atmosphere around them instantly. Some people brought peace into rooms. Others brought tension disguised as friendliness. Some smiles felt genuine. Others felt emotionally sharp underneath. One story still stands out vividly in my mind. A woman once described how her grandmother warned her against marrying a particular man despite his public reputation as successful and respectful. The grandmother claimed his energy felt dangerous. Nobody listened because the man appeared charming and admired socially. Years later, after marriage, the man became emotionally abusive and controlling behind closed doors. The woman later admitted that there were signs from the beginning, but everybody ignored them because appearances looked perfect publicly. This is what fascinates me about ancient traditions. They repeatedly warned that human beings communicate far more than words. And as we continue deeper into this audiobook, you are going to begin seeing human behavior differently forever. So if you are enjoying this journey so far, make sure you subscribe to Audiobook Binge, like this video, comment your thoughts below, and share this audiobook with someone who needs to awaken their perception too. There was a period in my life when I kept walking into rooms that felt emotionally heavy even before anyone spoke. At first, I thought I was imagining things. I would meet groups of people smiling politely, laughing loudly, and acting friendly on the surface, yet something inside me would tighten instantly. My chest would feel uneasy, my instincts would become alert, and sometimes I would leave those environments emotionally exhausted without fully understanding why. Then later, after drama, betrayal, gossip, or manipulation eventually surfaced, I began realizing something uncomfortable. Human beings communicate energy long before they communicate truth. That realization changed the way I viewed the third eye forever. Because what ancient civilizations repeatedly tried to explain was this: words can lie, appearances can deceive, but emotional energy constantly leaks through behavior, atmosphere, tension, and subtle reactions. And if you can relate to ignoring strange feelings around people before discovering their real intentions later, then understand something important. Your intuition may have been trying to protect you all along. That is exactly why this book was written for you. Ancient Hindu traditions believed emotional energy affected consciousness directly. Buddhist monks practiced awareness because they understood emotional atmospheres could influence the mind silently. African spiritual systems warned about jealousy and destructive energy long before modern psychology studied emotional contagion scientifically. Even ancient warriors trained themselves to read tension in rooms because survival often depended on sensing danger before violence appeared. Different cultures explained it differently, but they all arrived at one disturbing truth. Emotionally blind people are easier to manipulate. I remember hearing a story about a businessman who attended an investment meeting that looked perfect on paper. The people involved were wealthy, polite, and highly respected publicly. But the moment he entered the room, he felt deeply uncomfortable. Nobody had insulted him. Nobody had threatened him. Yet something about the atmosphere felt emotionally cold and calculated. During the meeting, he noticed small things that seemed harmless individually but disturbing collectively. Forced smiles, quick glances exchanged silently, compliments that sounded rehearsed. He ignored his instincts because the financial opportunity looked too attractive to walk away from. Months later, he discovered the deal had been designed to trap him into taking legal responsibility for hidden financial fraud. The people behind it had already prepared escape plans before he even entered the room. What disturbed him most afterward was realizing his body had sensed danger immediately. His intuition noticed emotional inconsistency before logic caught up. And if you have ever experienced something similar, where your instincts quietly warned you before reality exposed the truth, then you already understand the deeper meaning of awareness. This is one of the biggest misunderstandings people have about intuition. They think intuition always arrives dramatically like a supernatural vision or mystical sign. In reality, intuition often appears quietly. A strange discomfort, emotional tension, sudden exhaustion around certain people, an unexplained feeling that something is not fully genuine. The problem is that modern society trains people to silence these signals in order to appear polite, reasonable, and socially acceptable. Manipulators understand this perfectly. One of the most dangerous lessons I ever learned is that manipulators often hide behind charm. They study social expectations carefully. They know most people fear appearing judgmental. So they weaponize friendliness, politeness, generosity, and charisma to lower emotional defenses. Some manipulative people are not loud, aggressive, or obviously toxic. Some are incredibly likable publicly. In fact, the most dangerous manipulators are often the people nobody suspects. I once knew a man who could make almost anyone trust him within 10 minutes. He complimented people naturally, remembered small details, and spoke calmly in ways that made others feel emotionally safe around him. Yet over time, strange patterns began appearing around him. Friends turned against each other after private conversations with him. Relationships collapsed mysteriously. Business partnerships became emotionally chaotic. Everywhere he went, confusion eventually followed. What made him dangerous was not open aggression. It was hidden emotional manipulation disguised as emotional intelligence. And if you can already think of someone in your own life who behaves similarly, stay with me carefully because understanding these patterns can protect you from years of emotional damage. Many people spend entire lifetimes surrounded by manipulative personalities simply because they never learn how to distinguish genuine emotional warmth from strategic emotional performance. Now let us talk about jealousy, because ancient traditions repeatedly warned that jealousy carries powerful emotional energy. Jealous people often pretend to support you while secretly competing with you internally. One reason jealousy becomes dangerous is because it rarely announces itself honestly. Instead, it leaks subtly through behavior. Imagine sharing good news with someone you consider a close friend. Maybe you got promoted. Maybe your relationship improved. Maybe your business started succeeding. A genuine supporter usually responds with emotional warmth naturally. But jealous people often reveal themselves through delayed reactions, forced smiles, fake enthusiasm, sudden silence, or subtle attempts to minimize your achievement. I remember a woman describing how one of her closest friends reacted strangely every time something positive happened in her life. Whenever she succeeded, the friend became emotionally distant for days afterward. Compliments sounded forced. Conversations shifted toward criticism or negativity quickly. Yet whenever the woman struggled emotionally, the friend suddenly became extremely attentive and emotionally present. Years later, she realized something painful. The friendship was emotionally built around imbalance. Her friend felt secure only when she remained weaker, sadder, or less successful. That is why learning to read emotional atmospheres matters deeply. Energy reveals hidden emotional truth constantly. One practical way to begin strengthening this awareness is through silent observation training. For the next 7 days, choose one public environment daily. It could be a cafe, workplace, family gathering, church, or even a waiting room. Spend 15 to 20 minutes quietly observing behavior without participating excessively in conversation. Notice who interrupts constantly, who seeks validation, who watches others secretly, who forces laughter, who dominates emotionally, and who changes personality depending on who enters the room. Do not judge immediately. Just observe calmly. The best time to practice this is during emotionally active environments where people reveal themselves naturally. Group discussions work especially well because emotional hierarchies become visible quickly. And as we continue deeper into this chapter, you are going to realize something shocking. Most people unconsciously reveal their emotional state every single day without realizing it. If you can already relate to these experiences, subscribe, like, comment, and share this audiobook with someone whose eyes also need to open. One of the strangest truths I discovered while studying human behavior is that emotional energy spreads faster than words. You can walk into a room where nobody is arguing, yet instantly feel tension in the atmosphere. You can sit beside someone smiling politely while sensing hidden resentment underneath their friendliness. You can meet someone who says all the right things, but somehow leaves you emotionally drained after every interaction. Ancient civilizations paid close attention to this phenomenon because they believed emotional atmospheres affected perception, health, relationships, and even spiritual awareness itself. Some African spiritual traditions believed prolonged exposure to jealous or manipulative people slowly weakened emotional clarity. Buddhist teachings warned that surrounding yourself with emotionally chaotic individuals could disturb inner peace. Even ancient monks isolated themselves periodically because silence sharpened awareness, while emotional noise weakened it. And honestly, when I began reducing noise and distraction in my own life, I started noticing how emotionally loud the world truly is. Some people constantly carry hidden tension beneath their words, and once you learn to recognize it, you can never completely unsee it again. I once heard a fascinating story from a woman who worked in corporate management for years. She explained how one employee always appeared cheerful publicly. Everybody liked him. He joked constantly, complimented coworkers, and acted emotionally supportive during meetings. But privately, tensions always increased around him mysteriously. Coworkers began distrusting each other. Rumors spread. Small disagreements escalated into major emotional conflicts. Eventually, management discovered that this same employee secretly manipulated conversations behind the scenes. He enjoyed creating emotional instability because it gave him influence over insecure coworkers. What frightened people afterward was realizing how effectively charm had hidden his true intentions. That is why emotional energy matters. Human beings often reveal hidden motives through emotional atmospheres long before evidence fully appears. If you can already think of someone whose presence constantly creates confusion, exhaustion, or emotional instability despite their friendly personality, then your intuition may already be recognizing patterns your conscious mind ignored previously. Now let us discuss another powerful technique called energy scanning exercises. This exercise is designed to strengthen your awareness of emotional environments without becoming paranoid or emotionally overwhelmed. Before entering any social environment, pause for 30 seconds outside quietly. Take 3 slow breaths. Relax your shoulders. Then enter the environment calmly without speaking immediately. As you enter, pay attention to your emotional reaction. Notice whether you suddenly feel calmness, tension, anxiety, heaviness, exhaustion, or emotional discomfort. Do not force interpretations instantly. Simply notice your reactions. Some people notice headaches forming around emotionally manipulative individuals. Others notice exhaustion after conversations filled with fake friendliness. Some experience emotional relief when leaving certain environments. These signals do not automatically mean danger, but over time patterns become incredibly revealing. The best places to practice this technique are family gatherings, workplace meetings, churches, business environments, or crowded social events where emotional energy fluctuates naturally. And if you can already relate to feeling emotionally drained around certain individuals despite no obvious conflict existing, understand something important. Your body may already be detecting emotional inconsistency subconsciously. That is why this audiobook was written not to create fear, but to sharpen awareness. Ancient traditions repeatedly taught that emotional blindness makes manipulation easier. Now let us discuss fear energy, because fear often reveals itself faster than confidence. Ancient warriors understood this deeply. Samurai traditions emphasized emotional stillness because fear leaks through unnecessary movement, defensive behavior, rushed speech, and emotional overcompensation. Many people who appear dominant externally are actually hiding insecurity internally. I remember meeting a man during a business negotiation who appeared extremely confident initially. He spoke loudly, dominated conversations, and constantly projected authority. But the longer the conversation continued, the more inconsistencies appeared. He interrupted excessively, became defensive over small questions, and changed topics suddenly whenever details were discussed deeply. What appeared as confidence initially was actually fear disguised as dominance. This is why learning to read emotional atmospheres changes everything. Many people become hypnotized by appearances, but emotional awareness allows you to observe what behavior is trying to conceal underneath. And perhaps that is one reason ancient civilizations valued silence so highly. Silence forces people to reveal themselves emotionally without realizing it. Another powerful method for strengthening awareness is emotional replay analysis. Every night before sleeping, spend 10 minutes mentally replaying conversations from your day. Ask yourself which interaction felt emotionally genuine and which felt performative. Notice whether someone's words conflicted with their emotional energy. Ask yourself whether certain individuals became uncomfortable around success, criticism, or emotional honesty. Then write these observations in a notebook consistently for 30 days. Over time, patterns become astonishingly clear. One man who practiced this exercise realized a coworker only became emotionally supportive when authority figures were watching. Another woman realized her romantic partner constantly avoided eye contact during serious emotional conversations long before discovering hidden dishonesty later. This does not mean intuition is magic. It means your subconscious mind notices patterns faster than your conscious mind processes them. And perhaps that is what ancient civilizations understood best. The third eye may not simply represent supernatural vision. It may represent disciplined awareness sharpened through observation, emotional control, intuition, silence, and psychological understanding. The terrifying truth is that most people never develop this awareness consciously. They trust appearances too quickly. They ignore emotional inconsistencies repeatedly. They silence intuition in order to maintain comfort. But as we continue through this audiobook, you are going to learn something powerful. Manipulators depend on emotional blindness to survive. The moment perception awakens deeply, many psychological games begin collapsing instantly. So if this chapter is already opening your eyes to patterns you ignored before, make sure you subscribe to Audiobook Binge. Like this audiobook, comment your experiences below, and share this with someone who needs to strengthen their awareness too. There was a time in my life when I genuinely believed that deeply religious people were automatically trustworthy. I thought people who constantly quoted scripture, prayed publicly, preached morality, or spoke passionately about spirituality naturally possessed honest hearts. In my mind, religion and integrity were inseparable. But over time, life forced me to confront a painful reality that many people quietly discover for themselves. Some of the most dangerous manipulators in the world hide behind morality, spirituality, and public righteousness. And honestly, that realization shook me deeply. I remember meeting a man years ago who was admired almost everywhere he went. He spoke softly, dressed modestly, quoted religious teachings naturally, and constantly advised others about discipline, honesty, and spiritual living. People trusted him almost immediately because he appeared spiritually grounded. Families respected him. Communities praised him. Young people looked up to him. But slowly, strange stories began surfacing quietly behind the scenes. Emotional manipulation, secret affairs, financial dishonesty, psychological control over vulnerable followers. What disturbed people most was not simply his behavior. It was how effectively he used spirituality as emotional camouflage. He understood something terrifying about human nature. Most people lower their guard around those who appear morally righteous. That is why manipulators throughout history often surround themselves with symbols of goodness, humility, or spirituality. They understand that appearances emotionally disarm people faster than logic does. And if you can already think of moments where someone used kindness, religion, morality, or spirituality to hide manipulation, then understand something important. You are not imagining things. Human beings have been warned about false faces for thousands of years. That is exactly why this chapter was written for you. One of the most famous warnings comes directly from the Bible through the phrase, wolves in sheep's clothing. The image itself is powerful because it describes deception perfectly. A wolf survives not by appearing dangerous, but by appearing harmless enough to approach unnoticed. Spiritually speaking, many religious teachings repeatedly warn that some individuals use goodness as performance rather than genuine character. I remember hearing about a church leader who built an enormous following because of his public image. He spoke emotionally during sermons, helped struggling families publicly, and constantly preached about humility and faithfulness. People trusted him because he looked spiritually disciplined. Yet behind closed doors, former members later described emotional intimidation, manipulation, hidden financial exploitation, and psychological control. What shocked people afterward was realizing that the signs had always existed. Excessive need for admiration, anger toward criticism, obsession with control. And that is one reason religious deception becomes spiritually dangerous. It confuses perception itself. People begin doubting their instincts because they feel guilty questioning someone who appears holy publicly. Manipulators understand this psychological weakness extremely well. They know emotionally vulnerable people often fear appearing disrespectful, judgmental, or spiritually rebellious. So they use guilt, fear, emotional dependence, and authority to protect their masks. Islamic teachings also speak strongly about hypocrisy and hidden intentions. In many teachings, hypocrisy is considered one of the most spiritually destructive traits because it involves deliberately creating a false image while secretly carrying opposite intentions internally. Some teachings describe hypocrites as people who speak one way publicly while hiding completely different motives privately. And honestly, when I began studying this more deeply, I realized hypocrisy is not always loud or dramatic. Sometimes hypocrisy appears quietly through emotional inconsistency. A person who preaches honesty but manipulates emotionally behind the scenes. A person who publicly supports others but secretly envies them internally. A person who speaks constantly about peace yet creates chaos privately wherever they go. A person who condemns manipulation publicly while controlling others emotionally in relationships, friendships, workplaces, or religious environments. I once knew someone who constantly criticized dishonesty in others. Every conversation became a lecture about integrity, morality, and principles. Yet over time, people began discovering that this same person lied regularly in relationships, manipulated situations emotionally, and changed personalities depending on who was present. Eventually, I realized something important. Truly honest people usually do not spend all their energy performing honesty publicly. Genuine character reveals itself naturally over time. Buddhist teachings approach this issue differently by focusing heavily on illusion and ego. Many Buddhist teachings suggest that human beings become trapped behind masks created by insecurity, pride, fear, desire, and emotional attachment. In simple terms, people often create false versions of themselves because they desperately want validation, admiration, control, or emotional power. And honestly, once I understood this, I started seeing performative behavior everywhere. Some people perform confidence while secretly feeling deeply insecure. Some perform kindness while secretly carrying resentment. Some perform spirituality while secretly craving control over others emotionally. Some perform humility while desperately seeking validation and admiration internally. The more emotionally hungry a person becomes for attention, praise, influence, or power, the easier it becomes for manipulation to hide behind appearances. I remember a woman once describing how her partner constantly posted inspirational messages online about loyalty, kindness, emotional maturity, and spiritual growth. Publicly, he looked like the perfect partner. People admired the relationship constantly. But privately, she experienced manipulation, emotional instability, dishonesty, and psychological control almost daily. One day, she finally realized something painful. The public image was not designed to reflect truth. It was designed to protect reputation. And this is exactly why ancient spiritual teachings repeatedly warned people not to judge character through appearances alone. Human beings can rehearse behavior. They can memorize moral language. They can imitate emotional intelligence. But emotional truth eventually leaks through patterns, reactions, energy, and consistency over time. And as we continue through this audiobook, you're going to sharpen your awareness even further. So if this chapter is already making you rethink certain people, relationships, or experiences from your own life, make sure you subscribe to Audiobook Binge. Like this audiobook, comment your thoughts below, and share this with someone who also needs to awaken their awareness before deception hides behind another smiling face. There was a moment in my life that completely changed the way I viewed intuition forever. I remember sitting across from someone I trusted deeply while having a perfectly normal conversation on the surface. They smiled naturally. Their words sounded calm. Nothing openly threatening was happening. Yet for some reason, my body felt tense the entire time. My stomach tightened slightly. My shoulders felt heavy. I could not relax no matter how hard I tried. At the time, I convinced myself I was simply overthinking. Months later, I discovered that this same person had been lying, manipulating situations quietly behind my back, and emotionally positioning themselves against me for a very long time. What frightened me afterward was not the betrayal itself. It was realizing that my body had noticed danger long before my conscious mind accepted it. And if you can relate to moments where you ignored strange feelings around someone before eventually discovering painful truths later, then understand something important. Your intuition may have been trying to protect you all along. That is exactly why this chapter was written for you. Ancient civilizations understood something modern society often ignores completely. Human beings are constantly collecting emotional information subconsciously. Long before your logical mind forms conclusions, your nervous system quietly studies tone changes, emotional inconsistencies, facial tension, eye movement, nervous behavior, and hidden emotional energy. In simple terms, your body often notices danger before your thoughts fully understand what is happening. This is why certain environments instantly feel wrong even when nothing obvious appears dangerous. You can enter a room and suddenly feel emotionally uncomfortable without understanding why. You can meet someone who says all the right things, yet somehow leaves you emotionally exhausted afterward. You can sense hidden tension between two people before they admit conflict exists. These experiences happen because the subconscious mind processes emotional patterns far faster than conscious reasoning does. I once heard a woman describe how she ignored her instincts for nearly 6 years in a relationship because everything looked perfect publicly. Her partner was respected socially, supportive in front of others, and emotionally charming in ways that made people admire the relationship constantly. But privately, she often felt emotionally uneasy around him without fully understanding why. Certain compliments felt strangely rehearsed. Some apologies felt emotionally empty. Small lies appeared occasionally, but were always explained away convincingly. Every time her intuition tried warning her, she silenced it because she feared appearing paranoid. Then one evening, she accidentally discovered years of hidden betrayal involving multiple secret relationships, emotional manipulation, and financial dishonesty. What shattered her emotionally afterward was not only the deception itself. It was realizing that her instincts had been warning her for years through subtle discomfort she repeatedly ignored. That is one reason intuition becomes so powerful. It rarely screams loudly at first. It whispers quietly through emotional tension, discomfort, hesitation, exhaustion, or strange uneasiness. Ancient warriors understood this deeply. Samurai traditions emphasized emotional stillness because emotionally calm people noticed danger faster. Fear clouds perception. Desperation clouds perception. Emotional attachment clouds perception. But stillness sharpens awareness. That is why many ancient disciplines trained warriors, monks, and spiritual leaders to observe carefully before reacting emotionally. I remember meeting an older security professional years ago who once told me something fascinating. He explained that experienced investigators often trust instinct before evidence fully appears. Not because they are psychic, but because years of observation train the subconscious mind to recognize danger patterns automatically. He said sometimes a suspect appears calm publicly, yet small things expose hidden tension. Forced eye contact, over-controlled movements, delayed emotional reactions, excessive friendliness. defensive behavior disguised as confidence. And honestly, once he explained this, I started seeing nervous behavior everywhere. Some people tap fingers excessively when hiding emotional tension. Some overexplain unnecessarily when lying. Some become emotionally defensive over harmless questions. Others smile too quickly before emotional sincerity naturally forms. The body constantly leaks emotional truth, even when words attempt to hide it. One of the most important lessons I ever learned is that nervous energy often reveals hidden internal conflict. Truly calm people usually move naturally. But emotionally deceptive individuals frequently overmanage behavior because internally they are trying to control perception constantly. I once watched a businessman during a negotiation appear extremely confident initially. He spoke loudly, laughed aggressively, and projected dominance constantly. But the longer the conversation continued, the more strange behaviors appeared. He interrupted excessively, avoided direct answers repeatedly, became irritated over simple clarifications, shifted topics quickly whenever details became specific. Eventually, it became obvious that what looked like confidence initially was actually anxiety disguised as control. And if you can already think of people whose behavior suddenly changes under pressure, then you are beginning to understand subconscious pattern recognition already. Now let us discuss something practical, because awareness without practice changes nothing. One of the most effective ways to strengthen intuition is through what I call emotional tension observation. During conversations, stop focusing only on words. Instead, pay attention to your body's reaction while someone speaks. Notice whether you feel calm, tense, drained, emotionally pressured, or strangely uncomfortable. For example, genuinely honest conversations usually feel emotionally stable even during disagreement. Manipulative conversations often create confusion, pressure, guilt, emotional heaviness, or mental exhaustion afterward. Your body frequently reacts before your mind fully processes why. Another useful exercise is behavioral contrast observation. Watch how someone behaves under different emotional conditions. Observe how they act when calm, criticized, jealous, ignored, or emotionally challenged. Many manipulative people maintain controlled masks only during comfortable situations. Pressure exposes hidden emotional truth faster than rehearsed behavior can contain it. And perhaps this is why ancient teachings repeatedly emphasized awareness, silence, emotional discipline, and observation. Human beings reveal themselves constantly beneath language. The body leaks hidden emotion through tension, nervousness, reactions, inconsistencies, and subconscious behavior patterns. The terrifying truth is that most people ignore these signals because modern society trains people to prioritize appearances over perception. But as we continue through this audiobook, you're going to strengthen something many people never fully develop consciously. The ability to sense emotional truth before deception fully reveals itself publicly. So if this chapter is already making you rethink certain instincts you ignored in the past, make sure you subscribe to Audiobook Binge, like this audiobook, comment your experiences below, and share this with someone who also needs to awaken their awareness before manipulation hides behind another convincing smile. One of the most dangerous lies society teaches people is that dangerous individuals always look dangerous. Most people imagine manipulators as loud, aggressive, intimidating, or openly cruel. But real manipulation rarely begins that way. In fact, the most dangerous manipulators often appear harmless, kind, emotionally supportive, and deeply understanding during the beginning stages of influence. That is exactly how they gain emotional access to people's minds before control quietly begins. I learned this lesson through someone who entered my life appearing incredibly compassionate. This person listened carefully, remembered small details, checked in constantly, and always seemed emotionally available whenever I struggled. At first, it felt comforting, safe, genuine, but slowly, almost invisibly, the relationship became emotionally exhausting. Every disagreement somehow became my fault. Every boundary I tried setting triggered guilt. Every emotional concern I raised somehow transformed into a conversation about how much pain they were supposedly experiencing themselves. And that is when I first understood strategic victimhood. Some manipulators survive not by appearing powerful, but by appearing wounded. They present themselves as misunderstood, mistreated, abandoned, or emotionally fragile in ways that make others feel responsible for protecting them constantly. At first, empathy pulls people closer. But over time, emotional responsibility becomes emotional imprisonment. You begin walking carefully around their emotions while your own emotional needs slowly disappear completely. And if you can already think of someone who constantly uses guilt, sadness, emotional suffering, or victim stories to control conversations and relationships, then stay with me carefully because this pattern is far more common than most people realize. One of the most fascinating things about manipulative personalities is how skilled they become at emotional masking. Narcissistic individuals especially understand that open aggression scares people away early. So instead, many create highly attractive public identities. Some appear humble. Some appear spiritual. Some appear emotionally intelligent. Some appear deeply caring. But underneath the performance often exists an intense need for admiration, control, validation, and emotional dominance. I remember hearing about a charismatic leader who built an enormous following over several years. Publicly, he looked calm, wise, compassionate, and emotionally disciplined. People described him as inspiring, peaceful, enlightened. Yet privately, former followers later described emotional manipulation, fear-based control, psychological dependence, and extreme emotional pressure hidden behind his teachings. What shocked outsiders most was how ordinary and harmless he appeared publicly. That is the terrifying power of narcissistic masking. Manipulators understand something most emotionally healthy people do not think about constantly. Human beings naturally trust familiarity, warmth, emotional attention, and confidence. So manipulators study what emotionally attracts people. They learn how to mirror personalities, imitate empathy, and create emotional connection quickly. Some even become experts at studying emotional wounds because wounded people are easier to influence through attention and validation. I once met a woman who described how her former partner made her feel seen, faster than anyone else ever had. He listened intensely during conversations, complimented her deeply, and constantly described their connection as rare and special. But slowly, the relationship shifted emotionally. Isolation increased. Criticism became more frequent. Emotional guilt became constant. The same person who once made her feel emotionally safe eventually made her feel emotionally trapped. And perhaps that is why the most dangerous manipulators rarely appear aggressive initially. Open aggression creates resistance too early. Real manipulators often move slowly, emotionally, and strategically. They build trust before introducing control. They create dependence before revealing instability. They study emotional weaknesses before exploiting them quietly. That is why awareness matters so deeply. Because once you understand that manipulation often arrives smiling, listening carefully, and appearing harmless, your entire understanding of human behavior begins changing forever. And as we continue through this audiobook, you are going to sharpen your ability to recognize these emotional patterns before they fully trap you psychologically. So if this chapter is already making you rethink certain people or relationships from your own life, make sure you subscribe to Audiobook Binge. Like this audiobook, comment your experiences below, and share this with someone who may still mistake manipulation for kindness. One of the hardest lessons I ever learned was realizing that not everyone who supports you publicly wants to see you succeed privately. For a long time, I believed friendship automatically meant loyalty. I thought years of laughter, shared experiences, emotional conversations, and mutual history naturally created trust. But life eventually forced me to confront a painful reality. Some friendships survive not because of love, but because one person secretly enjoys feeling emotionally superior, more successful, or more stable than the other. And honestly, once you begin recognizing these patterns, your understanding of human relationships changes forever. I remember hearing about two men who had been friends since childhood. They grew up together, struggled together, and supported each other through difficult years. Publicly, everybody admired their friendship because it appeared loyal and unbreakable. One of the men eventually began succeeding financially through business opportunities that changed his life dramatically. At first, the other friend appeared supportive. He congratulated him publicly, celebrated his achievements, and constantly referred to him as brother. But slowly, strange things started happening around the successful man's life. Business opportunities mysteriously collapsed after private introductions. Romantic relationships became emotionally unstable after his friend spent time around certain partners. Rumors started spreading quietly behind the scenes. Invitations disappeared unexpectedly. Tension slowly entered areas of his life that previously felt peaceful. What made the situation terrifying was how subtle everything appeared individually. Nothing looked aggressive openly. Nothing looked openly hostile. Years later, the truth finally surfaced. The lifelong friend had secretly spent years sabotaging opportunities, spreading emotional poison quietly, and manipulating relationships behind the scenes because deep down he resented the success he publicly celebrated. What frightened the successful man most afterward was realizing the signs had always existed. Forced congratulations, passive-aggressive jokes disguised as humor, strange emotional distance whenever success was discussed, support that felt emotionally heavy rather than genuinely joyful. That is one reason jealousy becomes so dangerous. Truly jealous people rarely announce their resentment honestly. Instead, jealousy leaks slowly through patterns. Some fake friends constantly minimize your success subtly. Others disappear emotionally whenever your life improves. Some only feel emotionally connected to you when you are struggling, insecure, heartbroken, or financially unstable. Your pain makes them feel emotionally safe because your growth quietly threatens how they see themselves internally. And if you can already think of friendships that began feeling emotionally draining once your life started improving, stay with me carefully because hidden competition exists in more relationships than most people realize. One of the clearest signs of secret resentment is passive aggression. Instead of directly expressing jealousy, fake friends often communicate negativity indirectly. They disguise insults as jokes. They criticize your goals for your own good. They subtly discourage your growth while pretending to protect you from failure. And because the behavior appears socially harmless on the surface, many people ignore it for years. I once knew someone who constantly laughed whenever his friend discussed ambitious plans. Publicly, he framed it as humor and realism. But privately, his comments slowly weakened confidence over time. Every dream became unlikely. Every success became luck. Every improvement became temporary. Eventually, it became obvious that his negativity was not wisdom. It was resentment disguised as honesty. Energy-draining relationships also follow similar patterns. Some people leave you emotionally exhausted after every interaction because internally they operate through insecurity, comparison, and emotional dependence constantly. Genuine friendships usually create emotional peace, support, motivation, and stability. Fake friendships often create tension, self-doubt, emotional heaviness, confusion, or guilt without obvious explanation. And perhaps this is why awareness matters so deeply. Because fake friends rarely reveal themselves through one dramatic betrayal initially. They reveal themselves slowly through repeated emotional patterns over time. The delayed support, the hidden bitterness, the disguised negativity, the emotional discomfort around your growth. The terrifying truth is that some people love your presence but secretly hate your potential. And as we continue through this audiobook, you're going to sharpen your ability to recognize these emotional patterns before hidden resentment quietly poisons your life. So if this chapter is already making you rethink certain friendships, conversations, or emotional dynamics from your own experience, make sure you subscribe to Audiobook Binge. Like this audiobook, comment your thoughts below, and share this with someone who may still mistake hidden competition for genuine friendship. One of the most dangerous forms of manipulation does not begin with fear, aggression, or obvious control. It begins with emotional intensity, fast attention, deep conversations, endless affection, the feeling that someone understands you in ways nobody else ever has before. And honestly, that is what makes romantic manipulation so terrifying. It rarely feels dangerous in the beginning. In fact, it often feels magical. I remember hearing a woman describe a relationship that began like something out of a movie. The man texted her constantly, praised her endlessly, bought thoughtful gifts, and spoke about their connection as if destiny itself had brought them together. Within weeks, he was calling her different, special, and the only person who truly understood him. She felt emotionally chosen, seen, valued in ways she had never experienced before. But slowly, something changed. The same affection that once felt comforting became emotionally overwhelming. He wanted constant access to her attention. If she responded slowly, he became emotionally distant. If she spent time with friends, he acted hurt. If she questioned his behavior, he accused her of not appreciating how deeply he loved her. What once looked like passion slowly transformed into emotional control, disguised as devotion. That is the hidden danger of love bombing. Love bombing happens when someone overwhelms another person with excessive affection, attention, validation, gifts, emotional intensity, or promises very early in a relationship. The goal is not always conscious evil. Sometimes emotionally unhealthy people genuinely fear abandonment deeply. But manipulative personalities often use emotional intensity strategically because intense emotional connection weakens logical judgment quickly. And if you can already think of relationships that moved emotionally too fast before becoming emotionally exhausting later, stay with me carefully because these patterns destroy more people psychologically than most realize. One of the biggest signs of romantic manipulation is emotional dependency. Healthy love creates connection while still allowing emotional freedom. Manipulative love slowly creates emotional captivity. The relationship becomes your emotional center completely. Your mood depends on their approval. Your peace depends on their attention. Your confidence depends on their validation. I once knew someone whose relationship became so emotionally consuming that she slowly stopped recognizing herself completely. Her partner constantly framed their connection as us against the world. At first, it sounded romantic, deep, protective, but over time, isolation quietly increased. Friendships faded. Family relationships weakened. Independent thinking became emotionally difficult because disagreement triggered guilt, emotional withdrawal, or conflict. And that is how hidden control often enters relationships. Real manipulation rarely begins with commands. It begins with emotional conditioning. Some manipulators reward obedience with affection and punish independence with emotional distance. Others create constant emotional instability, so their partner becomes addicted to moments of temporary affection afterward. The emotional highs and lows become psychologically addictive because uncertainty strengthens emotional attachment in dangerous ways. I remember reading about several celebrity relationships that looked glamorous publicly, yet reportedly operated through intense emotional control privately. Publicly, the couples appeared passionately connected. Fans admired the chemistry constantly. But behind the scenes, stories later surfaced involving jealousy, isolation, emotional dependency, possessiveness, surveillance, and psychological manipulation. What fascinated me most was how many outsiders confused emotional chaos for deep love simply because the relationship appeared emotionally intense. That is one of the greatest illusions romantic manipulation creates. Many people mistake obsession for love, control for protection, emotional dependency for soul connection, jealousy for passion. But genuine love does not require psychological imprisonment to survive. And perhaps that is why awareness matters so deeply in relationships. Because manipulators often study emotional wounds carefully. They learn your insecurities, fears, loneliness, and emotional needs before slowly shaping the relationship around psychological control. The terrifying truth is that some people do not fall in love with who you are. They fall in love with the emotional influence they gain over you. And as we continue through this audiobook, you are going to sharpen your ability to recognize these patterns before emotional attachment blinds perception completely. So if this chapter is already making you rethink certain relationships or emotional experiences from your own life, make sure you subscribe to Audiobook Binge, like this audiobook, comment your thoughts below, and share this with someone who may still mistake manipulation for love. There was a time in my life when I believed awareness was something mystical people either possessed naturally or never developed at all. I thought highly perceptive individuals were simply gifted differently. Some seemed able to detect lies instantly, sense hidden tension, read emotional atmospheres, and recognize manipulation before anyone else noticed it. But after years of studying human behavior, emotional energy, religion, psychology, relationships, and ancient teachings, I finally realized something that changed the way I viewed the third eye forever. The third eye is not magic. It is awareness. And honestly, that realization is both empowering and terrifying at the same time. Because once you truly understand human behavior deeply, you begin seeing how much of modern life operates through emotional performance, illusion, insecurity, hidden motives, and psychological manipulation. You start recognizing how many people hide behind carefully constructed identities. Some hide behind kindness. Some hide behind confidence. Some hide behind spirituality, success, humor, beauty, intelligence, victimhood, or emotional charm. But underneath those masks often exists fear, envy, insecurity, loneliness, resentment, desperation, or the need for control. The third eye is the ability to see beyond those masks. Not perfectly, not supernaturally, but clearly enough to recognize patterns before emotional attachment blinds you completely. I remember meeting an older man once who told me something I never forgot. He said the reason emotionally aware people often seem different is because they stop listening only to words. They study patterns instead. Reactions, consistency, emotional energy, behavior under pressure, treatment of powerless people, hidden emotional tension. He explained that words can be rehearsed easily, but emotional truth eventually leaks through behavior no matter how carefully someone performs. And the older I became, the more true that felt. Some people say they support you while secretly competing with you internally. Some say they love you while slowly controlling your emotional freedom. Some speak about honesty while constantly manipulating reality around them quietly. Some preach peace while spreading emotional chaos into every environment they enter. And once awareness sharpens deeply, these contradictions become impossible to ignore. That is why perception matters more than appearances. Modern society trains people to trust presentation, status, confidence, social image. But awareness teaches you to look deeper. How does someone behave when they lose control emotionally? How do they react to another person's success? Do they create peace or confusion repeatedly? Does your body feel calm or tense around them? Do their actions consistently match their words over time? Because energy never lies for long. One of the most dangerous mistakes emotionally blind people make is assuming manipulation always looks evil immediately. But manipulation often looks attractive in the beginning. Helpful, supportive, romantic, inspiring, safe. That is why awareness becomes one of the greatest social survival skills a human being can develop. Not paranoia, not fear. Awareness. Awareness protects you from emotional traps before they fully close around your life. And perhaps that is what ancient civilizations were truly trying to teach through the idea of the third eye. Not magical powers, not fantasy, but heightened perception, emotional discipline, observation, intuition sharpened through experience, silence, and understanding human nature honestly. The terrifying truth is that many people go through life emotionally asleep. They ignore intuition repeatedly. They trust appearances too quickly. They silence instincts in order to maintain comfort. And because of that, manipulation becomes easier. Deception becomes easier. Emotional control becomes easier. But once awareness awakens deeply, something changes forever. You begin noticing emotional inconsistency faster. Hidden resentment becomes easier to recognize. Fake loyalty becomes harder to ignore. Manipulative energy becomes emotionally exhausting instead of attractive. You stop chasing validation blindly because perception becomes more valuable than approval. And perhaps that is the final truth about the third eye. It is not about controlling others. It is about finally seeing clearly. So if this audiobook has opened your eyes even slightly to the hidden psychology of human behavior, manipulation, emotional energy, and awareness, make sure you subscribe to Audiobook Binge, like this audiobook, comment your thoughts below, and share this journey with someone who also needs to awaken their perception in a world filled with emotional masks and hidden intentions.